Hello friends, welcome back. In our previous sessions, we have seen how to implement a CRUD operation using Spring Boot and MySQL. And we have seen examples. We have written a code to store the employee record into database. And also we have written a code to fetch the records from the database. And also we have written a code to fetch the record of a specific employee from the database and also to update a specific record into the database and also to delete a specific record from the database. All these examples we have written a code and we have executed and verified. Now in this session we'll check how to implement a validation, how to implement a form validations, and also we'll do some sort of tweaking to handle the storage. If already example, if already employee is present in the database, if we are trying to store the same employee into the database, we have to return the proper error message back to the end user. And also when we are trying to update the record, if record is doesn't exist in the database, we have to return proper error message. In case of delete and in case of get also, we have to return proper error messages. Let's see this example now. Let's go to the coding and we'll implement. Let's go to my controller. First we'll implement the validation. Let's go to controller. This is my create employee method. Here employee create request is my Pojo. Let's go inside this class. First thing what we required is, if we want to implement a validation, we have to add the validation Spring Boot dependency in the pom.xml. If you go to the pom.xml, in pom.xml already I have added this Spring Boot starter validations. This dependency we have to add into our pom.xml. Once we have added this, let's go to our request object. In that request object, I want to make mandatory for employee name and employee address. For that, we have to use the annotation called not blank, and I need to show the message employee name is mandatory, and also same like for employee address, not blank message employee address is mandatory. So this is our first step. What then, once we have added all the required annotations with the valid messages, let's go to the controller. Here we have to annotate with @valid. Okay, once we have done this, let's then, for example, when we are trying to when we are trying to store the employee without giving the employee name, so this error message has to show it to the end user. Now we have added this validation and also we have added the @valid annotation in the create employee method. Now we need to handle this. We need to handle these error messages, because we need to bind this error result and we need to return these error messages back to the end user. For that we need to write a small piece of code in our REST controller class, that is public. I will take it as a map and string comma string, and I will give the method name as handle method arc not valid. Let me write the full name, argument not valid, and this will take the parameter as method argument not valid exception. Method argument control space not valid exception, then I will give it as ex. And this method we need to annotate with at response. At response status, I will return the http status dot bad request response will return. Then we need to annotate one more like exception handler at exception handler, and this is the exception handler we need to add here dot class. Once we have done this, now we need to implement, we need to write a small piece of code to return handle and bind the error message and return that error message to the end user. For that, let's create the hash map object. First hash map object errors is equal to new hash map this. Now here this is my exception which I am trying to throw, so ex dot get bind result. Now from this get field error, get field error, get field errors of list type, this one for each, and let's implement the lambda expression. This will return error object, and this error object dot put this error object errors dot put of error dot get field and message, get default message, and then return these errors. We are return these errors. Let's see what we have written. We have declared one handle method argument not valid one method, and this method return type is map of string and string, because the field is field name and the default message name both we have to return. That's why I took this as string and string, string comma string as a generic type. And this method I am annotating with the exception handler, and this exception handler is this class method argument not valid exception class. We need to handle through this exception handler annotation. And my return response, my response, whenever I return the error message, my response will be the bad request. This will return the 400 error back to the end user, the client. And then we have created the errors mapping object and hash map object. Then this error, this exception have the method called get bind result. That get bind result having the field errors. Whenever this exception return, and it will bind that exception into this method argument not valid exception class, and it from that will get the field errors. Then each field error we have to iterate, and we have to map it to this hash map, and finally we have to return this back to the end user. Okay, once we have done with this, let's go to the implementation class. Let's go to implementation class. Here we have to do some sort of tweaking to return the proper error message if all user is already registered. See, what is this method? This method is used to create the employee. Here what we are doing, we are taking the request object and direct that request object we are mapping to the model, and we are storing it. For example, the same employee, if we are trying to store again it will not validate with the database. It will store the same employee into the database. This is one of the bad practice. Before we store any value into the database, we need to check whether that employee is stored in the database or not. Meanwhile, let me open my SQL workbench as well. Till this open, first let's validate the employee. For that, just copy this repository dot find by name. See, here we have to go with the custom field name method. How we need to create the custom method for the repository? By this find method by what is the employee in the model class. Where is the model class? This is our model class. Inside our model class we have a field employee name. We need to check first whether this employee name is registered or not. It means we need to fetch the record based on this employee name. So we need to create a method here, find by employee name, E capital, and then request dot get employee name. And this method is not available, so let's go to the repository and create this method. And string employee name, and this return type should be optional of employee model. Let's organize the imports. Okay, now once we have created this, now let's assign this to optional of employee model. Now emp model object. Now first, what happened in the creation of employee? We are trying to fetch the employee which is already registered or not. If all the employees sorry guys, if employee is already registered in the system, it will fetch the record and it will assign it to this variable. So what we have to do is, if this dot is present, means already, if it is already present, so we need to return return else block return this message, employee already exists in the database. Employee already created, employee already exists in the database. Let's write a simple message and remove the body. And also remove the body if the front end is required to return the already exist employee. So we can fetch this, this is model mapper, this is not required, and DTO mapper. Employee model is equal to this dot get. Now model dot, now just pass the model. Now let's see what we have done here. So this is my create method. This create method is having the employee create request as an argument, and then first what I am doing, first I am checking whether the employee whatever we are trying to store, whether it's already exist in the system or not. That I will check that with the database. To check with that, I need to find that employee, and I have, this is the custom method which I have created in the repository, and through this method I am fetching the employee record, and that employee record return type is optional of employee model. And then first what I am doing, if already that employee is present, if already employee present, then that already I am returning the error message employee already exists in the database. If not, then I am storing the value into the database. This is the create employee. How actually we need to handle the creation of employee. Then also next thing is fetch employee records. In case of fetch employee records, if there is no records here, for example when we are fetching the list of record, when we execute find all, this will give the list of employee model record, employee models. If this is not present, if this dot is, if it is empty, then we can return the error message, no employees, no employees found available in the database. So let's, this body will be blank, this error message will be returned in case of fetch employee records. Now in case of fetch employee record based on the ID, now we are fetching this. If this dot is present, if it is present, we can return this. If it is not present, we can return blank. Employee record not available, not present in the database. Let's remove this body. Now in case of update also, what we are doing, we are finding the record. First we are fetching the record based on ID. If this record is present, we are updating it. If record is not present, we have to return employee record not exist. If it is a present, let's move this code inside, else paste it here, employee record not present. Let's copy this error message. Okay, now next thing is delete. In case of delete, if employee record is there, it will get deleted, otherwise it will not get deleted. This mostly the delete operation people will not perform. The most of the organization, they will do the soft delete. So let's, if we want to handle, we can handle it. This will return void actually, this will not return anything. First what we have to do, we need to execute this statement. We need to find with the id, with this id if already present, we need to return, we need to execute this statement, and otherwise we need to return employee is not exist in the database. That's it friends. Let's relaunch my service so we can test all these scenarios through Postman. So my server is up and running on 2001 port. Let's go to the Postman. Here is my create. This is my create. Here let's try to create a employee. Today I will create employee John, and he is from USA and his experience is 9 and his experience years is 28. This is completely new employee, and let's check whether this employee is available in database or not. Let's open this local mm, select star from employee.t underscore employee. Let's select this and execute. See, we have two records. One is Sadakat, another is Khan. I'm trying to store the new record with the John. And here I'm giving the name as blank. See, first we'll check the validations. What happen if we give the name as blank? Create next. So it is returning employee name, and employee name is mandatory. This is field and this is the message. Employee name is mandatory. Let's give the name and let's remove this one. See, employee address is mandatory, so I have given the employee address as well. So like this, for example, if we want to add validation for years of experience, we can add for this, for example, or for all the fields, whatever fields we have, we wanted to mandate all those fields, then we can add the validations. Let's create this. Now the employee has been created. If we see this one, this employee has been created. Let's try to fetch the employee. Let's try to create the same employee in the database, then we'll see what error message it will return. See, employee already exists in the database and this is the details of that employee. See, this error message we have handled, right? That's why it is showing this message. Now go to the get. In case of get, if we want to fetch all the records, let's get all the records 1, 3 and 4. All these users record we are trying to fetch. Let's fetch the employee 2. Now if you see the here we have id 1, id 3 and id 4. Let's try to fetch the id 2 from the database. Employee record not present in the database, so it is showing employee record not present in the database. Let's fetch 3. So it has fetched the record. Employee record has been fetched. So this is the third employee record. Let's try to update employee second employee record, and his body were not passing, and I'm defaulting the value to some XYZ that I have hard coded. If we want, we can give it pass through body and we can read and we can make it as dynamic. Let's update this. See here, employee record not present in the database, and this is the details. One mistake what we have done here is the body we are printing, that's why we don't have record, that's why it is returning all the values are null and zeros. We have to handle these scenarios. In case of update, let's not return the body, this body, if it is not present, all implies this is fetch, this is fetch, and this is update, this is update. If it is present, we are returning, otherwise don't return this. Copy paste. Yeah, my server has restarted. Let's check this once again. See, employee record not present in the database. Let's go to the database now. Let's refresh this. See, one John user has created. Now I need to update his address. So what we have to do then, let's pass his id. His id is 4. If I pass his id, then employee record has been updated, his address has been updated to DSO UAE. So let's go and delete operation. We have not done anything, and if we want, we can handle for the delete operation as well. This how we need to implement in real time scenarios. That's it, friends. Please practice. Thank you very much. Please subscribe my channel.